Hello and welcome to today's video. This is the worst books I've ever read according to Goodreads. So my very last video was this exact same concept but for the best books that I'd ever read. I just wanted to do the same but for the worst books. So to get this list you basically go onto Goodreads, go onto your like read shelf, so it's just the books that you've read, and order it by average Goodreads rating. And then for me I just had to click it another time to get the worst at the top rather than the best at the top, and then it shows you a list of like the worst books like according to the average Goodreads rating. And for me I've decided to go through the lowest 10, and these are the lowest 10 but they're not like technically the lowest 10. So essentially there were a few where there were multiple books from the same series that would have been in the lowest 10, but obviously that's going to be really boring. Like I'm not going to have different thoughts, so I've basically discarded the higher rated ones from series and just kept like the lowest rated book from that series, and then like kind of ignored any others from that series and just kept going. So yeah, it's the lowest 10 but like with a few discarded if that series has like already been mentioned basically. But yeah, that is pretty much it. These are the lowest 10 average rated books, so like the 10 worst books I've ever read according to Goodreads. And yeah, let's just go through them. I will start at number 10, which will be like the best out of these worst, and I'll end at number 1, which will be the worst of the worst. I will say, don't like basically I wasn't sure whether to include number 1 or not, or whether to ignore it. I decided to include it because it is there, it is on the list. You'll see why when we get there, but basically don't expect like a massive reveal for number 1 and it being like a big shocking book or anything like that. Yeah, essentially I kind of think number 2 is the actual number 1, if that makes sense, because like number 1 I'm the only person who's rated it on Goodreads, but I stand by my rating, so I've included it, but the average rating is just my rating. I don't know, it's a bit awkward and a bit difficult, but like I've decided to keep it in, so it is the worst 10, it is number 1, but it's only my opinion that counts. So I don't know, I don't really know whether to count it or not, but let's just go through them. So number 10, it has a 3.61 rating, and I will say number 10 and number 9 could be interchangeable. They both have that same 3.61 rating. I'm just going in the order that they showed up when I was going through it. Like I haven't tried to order them myself, it's just how they showed up. So number 10 we have Allegiant, which is the 3rd book in the Divergent series, and I can 100% see why this would be in the worst books. Like personally I thought it was fine. I actually gave it 5 stars, but I've read it very recently. There was no hype, there was no nothing, and I already knew that the ending like was shit, so I wasn't going into it thinking this was, you know, the big end of a series. And honestly, like although it was a shit way to end it, I actually think it was really good. YA often doesn't go down certain tracks and do certain things, so yeah, for me, although I know it wasn't what a lot of people wanted for this book and the end of this series, I think it works really well. It had, you know, a decent ending. I gave it 5 stars. However, I can definitely see why other people didn't like it, and why the average rating is relatively low. Although to be honest, 3.61 I don't personally think is a bad rating. Honestly, none of these I'd go on Goodreads. Like if I was in a bookshop and I looked at them on Goodreads, none of the average ratings for these would put me off picking it up. Like I don't think any of them are too bad, to be honest. But yeah, number 1 is Allegiant. I get why it's on here, I just don't really agree with it. Like I thought it was fine, but I do think a lot of people would have read it and rated it when it came out and when the hype was going on, or like when the movies came out or whatever, and for that I understand that it would be quite disappointing and quite a letdown for it to go in such a direction. But just because it's not the direction you wanted, I don't really think that's like a good reason for a bad rating. And if you've read book 1 and 2, you obviously enjoyed those 2 to pick up book 3, so like I don't see anyone picking up this book and having like a problem with like the characters or the writing style or anything like that, because you already read books 1 and 2 and kind of like decided you like it, so I don't know, but yeah. So on to number 9, with the exact same rating of 3.61 is Suspicious Minds. So Suspicious Minds is an interesting one, because I think if you saw it in the store you could pick it up and read it, and I understand why people might not like it, but I think it's important to know that it's a Stranger Things novel based in the Stranger Things universe, and it's pretty obvious for me, at least when I read it, it's assumed that you know the universe already. You've watched the TV show before reading the books. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Like, it wasn't amazing, didn't blow my mind, but I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the extra backstory, you know. Book 1 is based around Eleven's mom, and we just learn about Eleven's mom and get that backstory, which obviously in the TV show we only really see a tiny little bit of that, and like we don't really know a lot about Eleven's mom, except for, you know, Eleven had a mom, and in the TV show, I don't think this is a spoiler, but at one point we do figure out who it was. So that's all we really know. So like, I really enjoyed this. Obviously I haven't actually looked at the reviews and like seen why people don't like it so much, but I'm assuming, well, 1, it doesn't follow the TV show, and 2, you need to have watched the TV show really, I think, to get the full enjoyment out of it and get it. And I think a lot of people could have gone into this thinking it was going to be something different to what it was, but yeah. I don't have strong feelings. I'm not surprised it's here, but like, I haven't read any particularly bad book except for one series which will show up very shortly, so yeah, not too surprised, not that shocked about it. And then at number 8, with an average rating of 3.57, we have Poor Unfortunate Soul. I gave this 3 stars. The Wicked Villains series, it's just called the Villain series, so this is book 3 in the Villains series, and they're fine. I've given it 3 stars, but like, it's not meant for me. Like, I think this is kind of like older middle grade. You definitely could read this in kind of like years 5 and 6 at school. Like, when I read it, I thought like, oh, like year 5 or 6 Heather would have really enjoyed this. So that's, you know, kind of the age range I think it is. I think you're like, what, like 10 to 12 in those years. So yeah, it wasn't bad by any means, but obviously I feel like the most people who are going to be reading it and enjoying it are kids. And kids don't have GOODREADS. This is only really going to be rated by like older people, so I understand why it wouldn't have a massively high rating. I gave it 3 stars, which like for me is a fine rating, but I know a lot of people like 3 stars is quite bad, but 3 stars is like in the middle. It's above like half, you know, like half of 5 is 2.5, so yeah, 3's not bad. I thought it was fine for what it was. I may keep reading these books at some point, but honestly they just seem a bit unnecessary. I think normally when you get like books or TV shows or whatever about like the villains, they hold your interest a bit more than what these books are doing, and they're fine. I'm just not massively enjoying them, honestly. And I read the first 4, I think there's 8 of them. If you know someone, the correct ages for them, I think they'd be really enjoyed by like kids who actually enjoy Disney and want to like know more about the villains, and it's a fun story, you know, but they don't hold up. As an adult you can't go into it. Like, I feel like a lot of books you can go into that are meant for kids, and even though they're meant for kids, you can very much see like, this is a good book, as long as I think, you know, these main characters aren't going to make adult decisions. This is still a good book. This one isn't one that I think you can do that so much. Then again, number 7 and number 6 are interchangeable. They both have the average rating of 3.56. So at number 7 we have Lunar Tides. This is a poetry collection. Now there's only 32 ratings for this. I gave it 3 stars. It was a pretty mediocre poetry collection, but I haven't read that much poetry, so I didn't feel like I was a very good voice for that. The poems just didn't really do anything for me. Like, if I remember correctly, I feel like a lot of the book relies on what like the moon phase is and like the lunar cycle is, and it splits it up into those sections, but the poems don't really feel like they're definitive in those sections, and it was quite repetitive. It was fine. I had a fun time reading it, you know, if I saw it for cheap, I'd probably pick up a physical copy. Like, it wasn't bad. I enjoyed my time with it. I just didn't, like, poetry I feel like normally makes you feel things. It normally really gets to you. It normally, you know, it's meant to open your eyes a bit, do a lot of fun things. This just didn't do that. It was just fine. Like, I enjoyed it. It was fine. So, yeah. I wouldn't say it's a bad book. I wouldn't say it's one of the worst books I've read, but yeah. And then at number 6 we have Snot Girl Volume 1. I gave this 4 stars, but now I'm thinking back, I feel like my 4 stars is quite generous. But I also think I went into this not really knowing what to expect, and I think a lot of the reason why I feel like it needs a lower rating, like for me personally, obviously like 3.56, like yeah, I can see why it's here basically. I was quite disappointed when I read it. I was, like, from what it sounded like, from what I thought I was getting, I was quite disappointed with what it actually turned out to be. It does have multiple issues in it, so it is a graphic novel. Basically, I was just a bit disappointed by it, and I can see why other people would be too, and I could see why people would give it a low score, so it doesn't surprise me. The art in it is amazing. I really enjoyed the art and the art style, which is why it got 4 stars. The story, not so much. And then we have number 5. Which, number 5 is part of a series. And this is one where there are quite a few books from this series on here. So I picked the lowest rated one. I can't believe how high up this is. I think, honestly, this, for me personally, if I was looking at all the books in this list, might be the worst of them all, and it's only at number 5. So with a 3.51 average rating is You Know You Love Me, which is one of the Gossip Girl books. I've only read some of the Gossip Girl books. I attempted to read them all for a vlog. I gave up. They were that bad, I gave up. Maybe I'll get round to them at some point, not going to be anytime soon. So I've only read, like, I think the first 4 or 5. They were dreadful. They were so bad. Like, honestly, like, trying to read these books, like, it almost put me into a slump. I hated it. I really hated the reading experience. I hated what the books did. I hated, like, how the books kind of tarnished the TV show and, like, my memories of it for me. And yeah, I did not have a fun time. I didn't enjoy them. I would never recommend them. Yeah, I don't have a lot else to say. I'm surprised it's at number 5 and not, like, lower down the list. But it's here, and I completely understand why. Then at number 4 with an average rating of 3.48 is The Lost Sisters. I'm not surprised that this is on here, but mainly because, like, well, first of all, it's a novella. It's never been, like, printed physically. It's a novella that you can get, like, an ebook of, and it's only 50 pages long. It is part of the Folk of the Air series, which is, like, the Cruel Prince books, and this book is from the other sister's perspective, and without giving too much away, I feel like throughout the main bulk of the books, you have certain feelings towards this other sister, not the one that we get in the perspective of, but the other one. You know, for a large proportion, you have certain feelings towards her. And this book kind of felt like it was written just to try and get you to change those feelings. I'm assuming because the series was finishing, and you know, it basically it's 50 pages of the exact same events that happen in book 1, but from the other sister's perspective and how she's thinking and feeling and why she's doing the things she's doing. It's just a bit shit. I mean, I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed the reading experience for what it was. I enjoyed the book for making me think, and it was unexpected, but it wasn't necessary. It didn't add anything. It didn't really make me think or do anything, and to be honest, I can remember the Cruel Prince series pretty well and the events that happened. I don't think I could tell you anything necessarily. I think I remember one scene from this book that we see from the other sister's perspective. That's it. One scene. Therefore, don't think it was really worth it. Then at number 3 with a 3.43 rating is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and the edition that I read also had like 2 other stories in. The average rating for this is 3.43. I rated it 3 stars. I did not enjoy it. 3 stars was kind of like the average rating for me, because there's 3 stories in here, so I did rate them separately. I haven't got it wrote down, but I think I gave like 1 3.5, 1 3 and 1 2 or something like that, so I gave it 3 stars. These don't hold up to modern day. This is a classic, but it's a classic with a movie adaptation, and a movie adaptation that I haven't watched recently, but when I did watch it when it came out, really enjoyed. I had higher hopes. It was really quite bad, and I think anyone who's gone into reading this after seeing the movie adaptation and thinking like, oh, the book's going to be better, because like, you know, normally the book is better, is going to have been disappointed, and I can see why it got low ratings. 100%. Then book 2 that is on here is a bit of a surprise for me. I have given this book 4 stars and the average rating is 3.41, which isn't really that much lower, but I think I know why it's on here so low. The book itself is Heroes. Now, I enjoyed this book for what it was, and my copy of it, do I even know where it is? Yeah. So my copy of it is like, you can see some highlights in here, no tabs, which I'll explain in a second, but you know, I started doing this like this, I think later. Basically, let me just explain. This is a book that is part of the GCSE curriculum, or at least when I was at school it was, for the combined English literature and English language GCSE, which is the GCSE that I did because you only have to do 1 English GCSE rather than 2, and in school, definitely not my strong point, definitely not great. Basically, most of this was on paper, and I think I did intend to always copy all my notes through, but yeah, this is, you know, like some pages are completely marked up, but this isn't notes, this is me making notes of things that could come up in an exam paper. Now, I ended up enjoying the story during the, I think I did this, I'm pretty sure I studied it in year 10. It might have been the start of year 11 as well, but I'm pretty sure it was year 10. And I ended up reading this about 5 times because I was determined to pass. And I really enjoyed it. I liked it. I thought the story was really good. I've reread it recently. I gave it 4 stars, which is like knocked 1 star off basically. But I still thought it was fine. But I think a lot of people will read this for their GCSE. Obviously, you have to read it all the way through. Like, you could be tested on any part of it. And giving it a low star rating because traditionally for GCSEs I feel like it's kind of known that the books aren't great and you don't enjoy it and you don't have a good time because you're not even really reading it just for the story. You're reading it to be able to analyse it and answer questions on it. It's just not a fun time, so I can completely see why this one's got a low rating. I don't agree that it's one of the worst books I've read. I don't agree that it's one of the worst books of all time, but I can see why it's on the list. And then last but not least, at number 1, we have Flea. Now, as I said earlier, I'm the only person who's rated this. I've given it 3 stars. I gave it 3 stars because it's a kid's book and I didn't really feel like I should give it any less than that. Like, it's not made for me. I'm not the target audience, but I wouldn't give this to a child. It wasn't a bad book in any way, but there was a lot of stuff in the book that made me feel like the children reading it would need to purchase more from the author. I don't know, it wasn't bad, it wasn't good. I feel weird it being on here because like it's only my review, and obviously like I don't think it's the worst book of all time and I'm not the target audience, so I don't really feel like I can talk about it. But a lot of the book had parts in it where it referred to the author's previous work in ways such of, well, as you know from my book, or as you know from the book, title of the previous book, this had already happened to the family. It didn't sit well with me. In adult writing, that wouldn't stand, you know, like I couldn't read, I don't know, like City of Fallen Angels and it'd be like, as you know from the Clockwork Prince series, or from the Clockwork Prince, the book in the Infernal Devices series, it was already known to be in this world, blah blah blah. Like, it just wouldn't hold, it wouldn't. And I think to include stuff like that in a kid's book is marketing and advertising, and it didn't sit well with me. I don't want to bash the book though, because it's not meant for me. And maybe it doesn't work like that. Maybe I'm not in a kid's mindset anymore because I haven't been a kid for a long time. But yeah, I don't think it's great. But take that with a pinch of salt and maybe get a kid to read it and actually see if it's a good book or not, or read it with a kid. I don't know, whatever. I'm gonna leave it at that because I feel weird and awkward about it. So yeah, those were the 10 worst books I've ever read according to Goodreads. The only 2 books that I kind of expected to see on here is because they're the only 2 books over the, you know, like the last few years I've read and unhauled, because they were that bad. I was like, no, like too many bad vibes, too much bad energy, so I got rid of them. And these were the Ladybird book of the hipster and the Ladybird book of the midlife crisis. I gave them both 2 stars, which I thought was a very generous rating. And on Goodreads, they like respectively had 3.78 stars and 3.89 stars as their average rating, which is quite crazy to me. They were shit. They were really bad. They weren't funny. They were literally just trying to be funny with slight information in, and they were shit. I hated them. So I was surprised that those 2 books weren't on here, which is, you know, why I did go back on Goodreads and look at the star ratings for them to see, you know, maybe they only just missed out and I should have done a couple more rather than just 10. But no, they were really, you know, middle of the road books, which is really surprising. I have no clue why, and I have no clue how you could read it and enjoy it, but each their own, and maybe they just weren't for me. Maybe, you know, there is a target audience out there. I know there's books that I don't like and other people like. I just don't know anyone personally, or anyone I even follow on Goodreads who's read them and liked them, so I just struggle to understand that. And maybe that's because the genre of people who like them just aren't on the internet places that I am. But yeah, they're the only ones that I was really shocked with. Except for that, like, I can understand why the rest are all on the list. Even if I don't agree, even if I thought they were good books, I couldn't understand why. So yeah, nothing too offensive, nothing to get riled up over, but yeah, I had a good time, I had a fun time, and I'm glad I did this, and I do think it's interesting. I might try and come up with a worst books I've ever read list, like personally, and like books I actually think should be on it. I just don't know how I'd do that, and I don't know how I'd do it without just ranting, and I don't like to admit too much negativity. Obviously I can say I didn't like this book and these are the reasons I didn't like it. I just don't think that would make a very interesting video for the worst books, because I don't want to recommend these books, and all it would be doing is giving these books more light. So yeah, that's it for now. I do really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please do give it a like if you liked it. Subscribe down below if you'd like to see more content like this, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye!